Welcome along to the Inner Huddle Series 2, Episode 5. As always, I'm joined by my right-hand man, or opposite man, as we are today, Geoff. Geoffrey Arthur Bonner, and our resident sports psychologist, Betsy Tuffery. How you doing, guys?
Good, I'm glad you didn't full name me.
Yeah, well, Geoffrey is Geoffrey Arthur Bonner on social media. So I presume you don't mind being called Geoffrey Arthur Bonner.
Arthur was my granddad's name and he was my hero, so I love it, yeah.
Excellent. Well, perhaps we should...
I won't full name you though, Pez.
No, don't full name me. Goodness.
Please, can
I've
we...
got a few.
I'm gonna put a question in next week.
Put a question in and maybe we'll talk about it and discuss it going forward. Right. I've been busy, guys. I'm quite aware that I don't often ask how you've been and what you're up to. I just say, everyone all right? So what have you been up to, Geoff?
Well, we had a brilliant but very long weekend
We did
this
have
weekend.
a very long weekend.
Joint hosting.
Well, it started Friday, recording a podcast with Dan Magnus.
Yeah.
And then
we had our usual Saturday sessions at
Yep.
Pez's or Wessex for either of us. And yesterday, Sunday, was all of the Pez's Academy players having their end of season match play day at the home of Wessex Futsal in Andover. And it was just great to see all the young kids playing full court futsal, which is quite a rare thing to do, especially in this country.
yeah, it went really well. So we had year 1s and 2s banded together, year 3s and 4s together, and year 5s and 6s. And did a little bit of a warm-up and played lots of futsal until they ran out of time. We had an inflatable there, so the ones who weren't playing could mess around with that and their free kicks and stuff. It was really good.
Great to see some ex-Pez's players coming back.
Yeah, so we had 3 Bournemouth players, one in the academy, George, and we had Finn Tonks and Cian Tybin, who are now full pros at Bournemouth, all come back to give something back to kids, and they were there from 2 till 5 the whole way through, and
I love that.
spoke to all the kids, gave them all a bit of advice, watched every single game. Yeah, it was brilliant. So you got Cian, full-time pro now, starting to get his tattoos and everything together and all that kind of stuff, and he turned to me halfway through and went, Pez, can I go to the toilet? This is like a throwback from when he was 5 or 6. I went, yeah, of course you can, mate. Don't worry about it. Tickled me. But yeah, a really good day. And you, Betsy?
Yeah, good. The puppy's still keeping me busy as well.
Oh yes,
yeah.
of course. We should always ask after the puppy, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
Puppy watch.
Puppy watch. Yeah, had a few days out of cricket.
Yeah.
Nice weather. Cricket's very much in the headlines at the moment. Enjoying the cricket, actually. Being very... there's a lot of conversation on the mindset and the psychology of the England team at the moment.
Yeah, I expect it's very interesting, especially where they're switching from the boring old style that maybe you played, Geoff, to now this Bazball.
Yeah, I heard a little bit on Talk Sport this week as well. Gareth Southgate was in and talking about similarities between what he's tried to do with the England football team on mindset, and it was really interesting actually, because he's a big fan of cricket.
I suppose whatever your philosophy is, if you hanging your hat on it and everyone's in it together, you're building a lot of team spirit that way, and everyone's in it together and as one. I didn't even listen to it, Geoff.
No, it's great, and yeah, I'm obviously a big fan of cricket.
You
so
are a big fan of
I
cricket.
could
Yeah, I'm the
probably
odd
do
one out
another
here.
podcast on that.
Yes.
Yeah, although I am getting into it. This Ashes series has captured my imagination, and I've watched quite a lot.
Which is the whole point of what they're trying to do, isn't it? They're trying to enthuse the nation and next players and people to watch the game. So.
I think they're doing a great job. But it's not football.
No.
So we need to move on, because I have, as always, 10 questions in front of me sent in from the general public from all across the world, and a few that I've thrown in there myself. And yeah, they look quite good this week, Geoff. Have you actually read through them?
Yeah, about 30 seconds ago.
Yes, Geoff, that's what we love about you. Well, we shall crack on through them from 1 to 10. Just to say that this episode is sponsored by SR Health, Safety and Engineering Limited, and all thanks to them for doing so. Right, question number 1, Geoff. Shall I crack on?
Yeah, and I'll do even numbers.
You do even numbers. Okay. Right. My daughter likes to use her toe a lot, especially to shoot at goal. but a few of her teammates have teased her about it and saying she shouldn't toe punt the ball. Should I be encouraging her not to do it? Jeffrey.
All right, my brief notes I made 30 seconds
30
ago.
seconds.
I've written down toe punt or toe poke because technically there's a difference in that. I don't know if you want to explain what the difference
No,
is
you
between
carry
the two.
on, Jeff.
So
I read the question.
see, I would view a toe punt as somebody at the back in a game of football under pressure, just trying to get rid of it. And
An aimless manoeuvre.
it might come off sometimes if you've got a quick striker that's running onto the ball over the top, but it probably is technically frowned upon and always has been since we were young. I would have got a bit of stick if I'd have done a toe punt, whereas with our futsal background, we love a toe poke, which is, I've definitely heard you describe it a bit more like a boxer's jab, where you have kind of no reaction because there's no triggers or cues to read. There's no sideways movements to pick up on, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere when a goalkeeper's not set. One example. So.
Well, Romario was fantastic at it. One player I can think of.
Without actually seeing the technique, and it's really hard to make a judgment on that, isn't it? It has got toe punt written down, so I wouldn't even say encourage not to do it anyway. And go back to the cricket and some of the analogies that you might draw from. There's lots of cricketers playing lots of shots that I would have got absolutely slammed for by my coaches when I was growing up, but it's just now the norm, and it's probably what's making cricket exciting, playing ramp shots and reverse sweeps and reverse slog sweeps and all sorts of things that were just not even in the technical books growing up. You know, you wouldn't say try that because you're more likely to get out. So if a toe punt is working and it's effective, then there's no right or wrong technique. It's just what works.
Yeah, if it's something she's doing because she's panicking and just wanting to get the ball away as quickly as possible, then that should be looked at with trying to make sure she doesn't panic and seeing what other options she might have, and helping her in that way. If it's, like you say, a toe poke used as a pass or a shot in particular, I think is very effective. And in fact, we love a toe poke, don't we?
Yeah, and it's something that the futsal ball specifically, it's kind of honed in that environment, isn't it? Because the futsal ball's slightly heavier. It's not as bouncy for sure, is it? So the toe poke, you can get like a real short amount of power in limited time, and
yeah, less of a back lift sometimes.
Yeah,
if you've got a really
exactly
good
that.
technique, but because the goals are smaller in futsal, the keepers fill up more of it. The toe poke gives the striker or whatever player an advantage because, like you said, the keeper can't read the signals. And any sport where someone's doing something a lot, repetitive, they pick up on little triggers and little signals. Go back to cricket. The batsman can hit a ball at 90 miles an hour being bowled at them because they've picked up on the signals of where the bowler's foot's started, how the ball goes out of their hand, all these little triggers, their hip movement, and they take an educated guess, I suppose, to start with, over years of repetition and practice. And it's a bit like that with a toe poke. So no, I wouldn't discourage it unless it's every time. And like I say, if it's because they're panicking and just hoofing it away using their toe, then yeah, maybe discourage that a little bit and find other ways that are more technically sound, maybe. But if it's in front of goal and stuff and it's working and being effective, no.
Maybe not discourage it, but maybe encourage trying to use different parts of the foot or different parts of the body.
It shouldn't be your only thing, because that would be wrong. But having it in your arsenal and your toolkit to use effectively every now and again, not a problem. Like I said, Romario used to use it all the time. The goalkeeper just used to sort of try and get himself set, and then woomph,
he's already passed them.
He'd toe poke it in, and the keeper probably wouldn't move because they've not picked up on any signals and triggers. So yeah, and don't panic. We don't know how old this girl is, so could be very young. Just crack on, explore and experiment. And if they're a bit older, then yeah, try and use other ways as well.
Sounds good. Good
Betsy, not a lot of sports psychology in that one, I don't think, unless you can.
No, I think I'll probably just echo what Geoff said. Well, what you both said really. In not so much discouraging it, but encouraging to try different ways to finish. If this is specifically, I know she says there, or I say she. The question asker has put especially to shoot a goal. So I guess just encouraging to try out different finishing techniques.
Oh yeah, she did put shoot a goal, didn't she? So yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, no, I wouldn't discourage it, but find other ways.
Just encourage different practices, different finishing techniques. But yeah, acknowledging when it is effective. You know, giving good feedback on that. If it's she's shooting on goal in this way and it's going in, then happy days. But how can she develop and learn different techniques?
I always find with anything like this, if it's successful, everyone praises it. Oh, that's amazing. But if you try something a bit left field like this and it doesn't work, then everyone's on you. It's a bit like trying a skill or maybe even using your soul, which we've talked about before. When it works, everyone thinks, oh, that was amazing. But if it doesn't, because it's slightly different to the norm, you tend to get a bit more criticised for it. So the upshot is, no, don't discourage it, especially as it's shooting at goal, but encourage to develop other techniques further.
Just to add one thing in there.
Yes, go on.
It might be that it might actually be the opposite that you need to look out for, because if her teammates are starting to tease her about it, but it is effective, that might discourage her from doing it anyway, which then could be negative, because if it is effective and it is part of her technique that she's using to play that's serving her well, and then she becomes discouraged because she's being teased for it, actually you might need to encourage her to do it, to continue doing it as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it might be a signature move. I don't think I was going to tease her if he ends up scoring a cup final or league-winning goal with her toe eventually. And I don't like anything that's discouraged. I don't like discouraging using the sole, using the toe, because, you know, or dribbling past players or anything. All these sort of things get coached out of people that can actually be something they can excel at one day. So you have to be very careful of discouraging anything.
It might be good to find a role model online on YouTube as well and see
It's a great
if
idea,
there's
Geoff.
any goals scored that way, and maybe just a variety of other goals that are scored in different ways to try as well, just to add a few more tools.
Yeah,
to the
I'm
toolkit.
sure. Is it Sadio Mane scored one for Liverpool? I think that was particularly good. I think there's, if you type in toe poke goals into YouTube, I'm sure you'll get loads. Romaro's the one that springs to mind for me back in the day.
Yeah.
Used to be very effective for him. Cool.
Question number 2.
Good start there, Geoff, I think.
Yeah.
Question number 2.
This one is definitely geared more towards Betsy.
Yeah, I'm just going to fold my arms and sit back for this one.
Because we've both got no clue. Question number 2. What is spotlight profiling?
And I must confess, this is my question, because I saw something on your social media about spotlight profiling, and I thought, what on earth is that? I've never heard of that before. Sounds very interesting.
Yes.
I know, I'll Google it. And I thought, no, I won't. I'll ask Betsy in an episode. And I haven't Googled it, so I still don't know what it means.
And Geoff, you're clueless as well?
Well, in our group chat, Pez said he's not going to Google it, so I took the
Googled
lead.
it.
I took the lead from Pez.
Oh, so you didn't Google it?
No.
Okay,
well,
so I can say anything now.
Yeah.
So, spotlight profiling, this is kind of a recent thing for me. So, is a profiling tool to be used by, well, predominantly by sports psychologists, but from other professionals you can gain your accreditation. It is essentially, it's a profiling tool that was born out of elite performance. So Spotlight it is a trademark from a company called Mindflick, and they created this profiling tool really ground in like literature and research to give an indication of like performance preferences. Okay. So I've used it a lot with athletes, but also with MDT staff members of elite teams, coaches, physios, strength and conditioning coaches. It could be anyone. And basically, it gives you complete a questionnaire online, and it creates a report, quite a detailed but really easy, nice to read, user-friendly report that you then get debriefed with an accredited practitioner. So I'm now an accredited practitioner. So if you were completing Pairs a Spotlight profile...
Maybe we should, Geoff.
Yes.
Definitely.
I would welcome you. And then you can also do a team map. So then you can look at what situations you might potentially work well together, like what considerations might you need to make in terms of operating together. So it's quite useful in a squad situation where you've got maybe 20 players, and you need to look at how the combination of characteristics of dominant preferences. So the preferences that come out are based on 2 different areas. So firstly, your mindset preference. So for example, it's a 4-point grid of a contained mindset, prudent mindset, optimistic mindset, and I'm putting myself on the spot here, aren't I? No, I should have written this down. And you've got mindset preferences and behavioural styles, and then you have a combination of the 2 that create your performance preference. So this is almost your dominant style that you're likely to go to.
Okay.
When you're under pressure, when you're operating in a work environment, even as a parent potentially, what kind of characteristics do you display? That's kind of your go-to. But I guess the key thing about the tool is it acknowledges, it doesn't shoehorn you into, this is the kind of person you are, and this is how you'll respond. It might say, okay, you'll typically maybe go into this mindset, you're typically quite contained, maybe you don't show a lot of emotion in a situation, but you can go into the other mindset preferences, you can branch out into them. And the tool itself and the debrief kind of gives you a little bit of food for thought of how might you do that, when might that be useful. So for example, you might be quite contained, that might be your dominant preference, that you would be really level-headed, great in a crisis.
So does the questionnaire give you different situations?
No, they are pairs of words, and you have to rank where...
we're going to have to do this, Geoff. So
it's very interesting. It's the only profiling tool that I've actually used and stuck to. I've been maybe a bit stubborn with this throughout my career, of not leaning on a profiling tool, because I think they can falsely encourage people to classify themselves as, I'm this person, so therefore this is what I can and can't do.
You're very careful with labelling, haven't you?
Exactly. So that's why I've not really got caught up with a profiling tool really before, but this Spotlight's just really, really clever in the way it says this will be your dominant preference, maybe this is your secondary preference, and this is how you might branch out. So it might be that you find it difficult to deal with conflict, and you need to tap into a more forceful behavioural style at times. So how do you do that? And it's a bit more of a conversation about that. So yeah, really interesting tool.
Okay, so who would use this? Would it be sort of just elite level, or can it be right across the board, and what sort of ages could use it?
So they did look into, it's at the moment the tool is for over 18s only. Kind of due to some of the, they ran research into using it with under 18 athletes, and it's not completely appropriate also for the developing growing mind. So in terms of who could use it, I think parents, coaches, even staff teams, to get that team dynamic. So it is an over 18 tool, but there's no stipulation or lack of benefit if you're not elite or professional. It's a personality profiling tool. It
sounds like a manager of young children might want to find out a bit more about themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately think, okay, where are my strengths in this area? Where are my character strengths coming from? And what are my kind of take care areas that I might need to be a bit mindful of that could be unhelpful in certain situations, and how do I develop myself to maybe reach other behavioural styles?
Yeah, so good for parents as well then, that want to delve a little bit deeper and make sure that, I suppose, they know more about themselves before they're trying to help somebody else.
Yeah.
I like it, Geoff.
So do the adult teams you work with, the players actually do it as well?
Yes, so players and staff. Yeah, and then, like I say, creating that team map can be really nice to look at. I guess for players to acknowledge there's loads of different styles within this group.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, how do I deal with someone that's got a very, very different performance preference to me? How do I give them... There's a really interesting part of the profile which talks about wriggle room,
Okay.
which is basically, say for example, Geoff, you're like a super creative player, and that's going to come at a cost sometimes of maybe overcook that and you might become risky with play.
Yeah.
So everyone will think it's fantastic when you're super creative, but then be annoyed with you when it's overcooked. And it's almost going, okay, we can't have perfect Geoff all the time. So actually his little bit of wiggle room might be, yeah, he's going to make some errors or maybe take risks because of that style.
So allowances because
Yeah.
of the benefits outweigh the
Yeah.
negatives.
Similarly,
Okay.
I might be super contained, which I'm not, but I might be really contained, and actually as an athlete in a team environment, I might want to take myself off to my room and not really engage in a social activity. And for that bit of wriggle room I might be for someone to go, okay, she's not being rude, she just maybe needs a bit of time on her own, for example, or someone that's super reflective and just wants that quiet time. It's actually everyone going, okay, what are the characteristics we need to acknowledge in other people, and what allowances might we need to make, because no one gets it right all the time, but we'll get it wrong in different ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very interesting tool. So teams and individuals are made up, completely differently. So I suppose this helps with that and trying to get to know what makes people tick a bit better, so that you can ultimately help them the best.
Exactly. And for them to just understand themselves a bit better, maybe start looking at understanding their teammates. And like I say, I've used this with staff teams as well. How do they operate together? What do those preferences look like in combination? It's interesting.
But it's been a thing with teams for years where everyone wants to be treated equally and fairly, and it's impossible.
Yeah.
So that little bit of wriggle room, if you've got a couple of star players and you want to get the best out of them, they might not be so good at training, whereas other ones you want to continue being good at training, so you have a bit of leeway on each side on discipline and things like that. But I suppose if everyone's doing it, then they might realise, that's their wriggle room, and not be a conflict there, where it's caused a lot of conflict in a lot of teams throughout history. People say, well, if I'd have done that, or why are you letting them have an extra day off here, there and everywhere? And I know it's changed a lot now, because you've got sports science and stuff, and the sports science will say so-and-so's not training today because they're in the red zone or whatever, and they've got a day off. So I think people are more acceptance of it. Whereas back in the day, if someone was given a day off, all hell would have broken loose. So. Got into the world of pro football a little bit there, Geoff, but very interesting. Thanks for that.
How long does it take to fill out the questionnaire?
So it's about, I'd normally say to allow 15-20 minutes.
Oh, that counts you out, Geoff. You can't concentrate for that long. I'll do it, Betsy.
And then you don't get, so if you were to complete it, I'd send you the link, and then you wouldn't be in receipt of the profile.
Okay.
It would come to me, so you don't see it until we debrief it together, which just stops that initial you reading through it and going, oh, well, I am this, and I am this, and this is what I do. It just allows me as a practitioner to kind of frame it up in the right way that the profile's intended. So to say, this is where you might lean into a bit stronger, and it might be a stretch for you to, tap into the logical side, for example, but this is how you might start to do that. So,
So in an under 23s team, for example, they'd all do the questionnaire, then you would do a debrief them all individually. I suppose nowadays have to ask permission whether you can share that with the manager, and then
and then a team map.
For that, and then that gives you a great base, doesn't it, for
it's
everything?
It's really useful, yeah.
I can see why it would be really useful. I wonder if they'll do some sort of kids version at some point.
They did look at it, but nothing as yet.
I've got a question coming up, which is, I touched on this a little bit, but just knowing what your players why they're there, why they're playing football.
Mm.
Could be a real basic version of it.
Yeah.
There's a good starting point, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Oof, well, thanks for that, Betsy. Goodness. I'm going to send me the link.
I will.
And Geoff. See who does it first. It's not supposed to be a race, is it? But anyway. Right, question number 3. Cool, this is a long one. I can see why you were happy with the order. The manager of my son's under-8 team has had to step down. I've been asked to take over and I have accepted. Although I played quite a decent standard myself, I am nervous taking over the team as it's a bit out of my comfort zone. I really want to do a good job though and help the children develop. Have you got any advice for me? Well, I think they're in the right place for advice. This is right up our street, isn't it, Geoff?
I hope so.
Do you want to go first?
No, I want you to go
You want to go
first.
first? Okay, well, I did write a few notes, but just looking at the question, I like the way it's written. They obviously care. They're a bit nervous, which means that's because they care about it, I presume, which is a good start. Want to do a good job, which is great. And I love the word that they put, want to help them develop. I think that's key. They've not going into it by the looks of it, the attitude is I want to help them to win lots of games, etc., and be top of the league. And not that you should have leagues at under-8s, but I think teams and leagues tend to get around that now, don't they? And there's a lot more competitive football than there was a few years ago. So that's a good starting point with development. I've put here be fair and honest with everyone, because that's a good starting point. That's with the kids and the parents, because if you start not being fair and honest, people will see right through you pretty quickly and then the respect will go. Good communication is key with your players and your parents. Because we've already touched on it before, that everyone's got different reasons for being there. Parents have got different expectations of why their children's there, and then trying to find out what those are is a good starting point. And then being clear with what your philosophy is and what you're trying to achieve, and how you want things to go and develop, and keep talking to them all the way through. And if you do that, you can be accountable for that as well. If you're saying that it's all about development, but then you're picking your strongest team every week and leaving people on the bench, then you're not doing what you said you would. But if you want to be a manager that wins every week and you're going to do that, then tell the parents that's what you're going to do, and then that's up to them whether they're happy with that or not. So good communication. And I've written here, very importantly, find out why your players want to play football. It is the best starting point, because they'll all be there for different reasons. One will be there because mum wants him to play. One will be there because his best mate's there. One will want to be the next Messi or Ronaldo. One won't know why they're there. They just are. There's just so many different reasons, and it's very, very interesting. I used to do it with my teams. Used to write down the 10 to 12 most popular reasons for being there, and used to get the kids to pick their top 3 and then put them in order, and then I would know a little bit more about that player, and then I would map it, in a good word, across the team and see if there was any that came out on top. And from memory, the one that always used to come out on top was to have fun and enjoy it. And I used to spring this on the kids and not tell the parents as well, because otherwise parents can influence a little bit and get in their head. So I used to just do it randomly at the start of the season, training session. I used to literally print them out and write the cards down and give them all to sit by themselves and order them. And then you can just get a little bit of an idea, and then that's your philosophy because it's their team. So if it's to have fun and enjoy themselves, to make new friends, whatever it might be, even if it's they want to win trophies, if that's what's come up as the team, then that's what you should look to do, because that's what the kids want. If that makes sense, Geoff, I hope it does. Just gives you a really good starting point than trying to please everyone, because when you're talking to the kid's dad, who the dad wants to win everything, might be a different conversation to the the kid who's just there to have fun because his mates are there, and you'll end up trying to please everyone in every conversation you have with parents. So this is a good starting point to get the team philosophy and what you want to achieve. So I used to then tell the parents and say they want to have fun, they want to learn new skills, which is always surprisingly near the top from memory, was to learn new skills. And to be a pro player and to win trophies, we're always down the bottom. But if you'd given that to the parents, I'm sure it would be the other way around. So you've got conflict right from word going. I used to do this with under 7s, under 8s, right from the earliest age. So you'd have a conflict with what the parents wanted and what the kids wanted right from the go. So a good starting point. So that would be my advice there. So Geoff waffled on.
Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. Touch wood. I think this is in danger of being the best podcast yet.
There's still time, Geoff. There's still time.
And I think if the coach was to sit down and do that themselves, top of my list would be under 8s especially. The kids want to keep coming back every week, so maybe do the same thing yourself. And make sure you
for your
stick
own
to,
reasons why you're
as
there,
well as
what
the
you
kids
want,
doing it, and then try and match that up.
Well, if you're brave enough, get the parents to do it as well, and then you can show where all the differences are and map out the conflicts or potential conflicts going forward. And
you're loving the mapping out, aren't you?
yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm taking that on board massively. And I think that's a really good start. And then you know why everybody's there. And if there's any conflict going forward, you can say, well, it was mapped out again, right from the start, where we were going, what we were about. And then it's up to the individual parents and children if they want to be part of what that club is building, or that team in that club. God, you could even do it for the whole club, couldn't you, Geoff? And then you could map out across the whole club. And that could be the club's philosophy.
And then the league could do it. And do it for the whole league, It would be never ending.
Could be some sort of tool we could create online. Yeah. If we've got any wonderful tech people are listening, get in touch. See if we could put something together. Have you got anything? Because I've written a few more bits, Geoff. I'll ask you first. Anything on the actual coaching side of things?
Under 8s, isn't it? So I think a lot of it should be me and my ball for the kids. I've seen that written a lot on Twitter lately from different coaches. And as you always say, Pez, go and explore what you can and can't do, and work on the things that you want to improve on, and keep working on the things that you are really good at. Keep honing your skills, and master
the ball, master the game. Which I think it's a catchphrase somewhere. I've put a couple of real simple bits of advice. As a coach, always maximise your time. 11 for 1 hour, maybe 2 if you're lucky, a week. Maximise that time. Don't waste it. So kids in queues, straight lines, things like that. If only 1, 2 or 3 kids are actually touching the ball at a time, then all the rest aren't developing. It's just mathematics. If you are doing stuff that's got cues, maybe a simple crossing and finishing thing, then can you give all the kids in a queue a ball and get them to do some keepy ups or some ball mastery work? Or can you be clever and get them all doing a group doing some ball mastery, and you're just taking a few out at a time to do whatever the topic is, and splitting the groups. Everyone needs to be active at all times. I've put here, kids don't learn in straight lines, they learn through contact time with the ball, purposeful practice, chaos, mistakes, decision-rich environments, and adapting. And those are the things you need to look for, and you don't find that in drills and straight lines. The days of the drills when we were kids, when X passes to Y, passes to Z, and then gets the ball in the box for everyone to miss. It just doesn't develop good footballers anymore. It might if you're under 18 team and you're struggling with your crossing and finishing or something, and
you'd be miles better off setting up loads of 1v1s and 2v2s and 3v3s.
Everything maximised. Don't have kids stood out watching, because whilst they're watching, they're not developing. Another example would be when most people start coaching, they put loads of cones down and you all dribble through straight lines, have a bit of a race and use different parts of the body. Instead of doing something like that, you could just give everyone a ball, so everyone's going at the same time, and put hundreds of cones down on the floor or gates and get them to dribble randomly. And then they've got other players that they've got to adapt to avoid. You can shout out different colours where they might have to only dribble around different colours or go through different coloured gates. So it's got to be random and a certain element of decision making as much as possible. And I do this one now, Geoff. I think I told you about it the other day. We get all the kids, the real young ones, to dribble around. You can put conditions on. It could be left foot, right foot, or whatever condition you want to put on. And we now launch cones at them at the ball. And it sounds horrific, but it's not. They're just the little plastic cones, and you just try and hit that ball. So they're stopping, they're starting, they're moving, they're being aware of all the other players, all the other balls, plus the cones that are already on the floor. And then you've got a couple of coaches either getting close or doing it from far away, so then they've got to scan around where the coaches are, and you're getting much more near the real game.
And if the kids aren't enjoying it, the coaches will be having a great time.
Honestly.
As long as those cones don't go rogue.
Yeah, no, we haven't had a rogue cone yet. You have to be grown up and mature with it. But yeah, coaches love it, kids love it. From a distance you can sort of frisbee it along the floor. But then after a couple of minutes you've got loads on the floor as well, so they're dribbling around the ones on the floor, being aware of coaches from all different angles, and have a lot of fun with it. And that would be a good example of maximising your time for a whole group and getting out of it what you can.
It's also a really good way, like by the sounds of that, of creating... You could have some children that would get frustrated at that because they can't just do their linear practice, and there's someone else kind of trying to boycott that a little bit.
Especially if they're very good at a linear practice.
Exactly. So it's a good way of saying, there's going to be other things and other people and other conditions that get in your way here, and actually have fun trying to navigate through that, rather than simply, I can imagine some young children getting pretty annoyed with that, or disheartened that, I can't seem to dribble when Pez is launching 20 cones at me. Or
with
at
sound
the ball,
effects,
sorry,
because they're bombs. So they're bombs when you're throwing them, and they're minefields when they're on the floor. So it does come with sound effects. But yeah, great fun. And that's just a very small example there where you can take a basic linear drill, use your imagination, be creative, so that everyone's involved, and enjoy it. Would be my final bit of advice on this one. Try and enjoy the experience, and don't get overwhelmed by anything. It can be overwhelming, can't it, Geoff, with parents' expectations, definitely, and what kids want, and the competition and match days.
And if it's a cold, wet evening, don't get overwhelmed with trying to impress the parents by doing what you think they want to see. Just get them playing matches and having fun. And if it is raining, let the kids know that they can turn up and have a match night rather than standing in queues, getting bored, cold and wet.
Yeah, at Pez's we sort of have a rule. If it's raining, we'll just play matches. Yeah. We don't want any... we don't do drills anyway, but we want them all keeping warm and focused, and matches seems to do that. But we can still put conditions on those matches, and it's not just tip
hire
up
a sports
and play,
hall and do some futsal as well. That would be my advice when it's the cold winter months.
Well, if anyone wants to buy us a futsal hall, then I'll do futsal all the time, Geoff.
No, I was talking specifically about this under-8s coach.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, that's not a bad shout, actually, to do some futsal during the winter months. And if you've got games called off due to the bad weather, try and hire a hall and take it indoors. And if you are ever, this is another bit of advice for any coaches, if you're going to train indoors, don't use footballs, use futsal ball. Even if you don't know what futsal is and you're not keen on it, or you don't like change, whatever the reasons might be, don't use a football, because the kids spend half the time running after them, and it's not running club, it's football club, as I always say, Geoff. You want to get loads of touches of the ball, and it's like magic. Just swap the footballs for futsal balls and see for yourself. It's powerful, isn't it, Geoff?
Yeah.
You've done it. Seen kids launching footballs about, and they're pinging off the walls and bouncing off people's feet, and they're just chasing it everywhere. Put a futsal ball and it sticks, and it just helps the session massively.
Good tip.
Cool. Yeah, I should write a book, shouldn't I, Geoff?
Yeah.
Right.
And I should read it.
Cool.
Can I just add
that
on
was
to that
time
one?
out. You can add anything you like, Betsy. You're our expert.
I firstly really like the fact there's a lot of humility in this question.
Mm-hmm.
Of obviously the person that's written it played quite a good standard, but still nervous, feels outside of the comfort zone a little bit, and really wants to prioritise doing a good job helping children develop. So I think firstly that humility is probably going to stand all the children you're working with in really good stead. And I think one thing that you mentioned, Pez, which I think you probably haven't realised that it was a golden point.
Probably not.
is when you said about the cards and getting them to pick reasons why they're there, reasons why they want to play football, for example. I think don't underestimate the value of time like that, which isn't playing football, because you might learn something, and when time is short and you've got an hour or you've got, limited time and you just want to be playing and getting them with the ball, I think it was just a nice point you made there of actually spend the time doing that, which is, off pitch in inverted commas. So yeah, I guess don't be afraid to do that for the greater good as well.
Yeah, it's quite a brave thing to do, especially when the parents tip up the kids expecting to see football.
Yeah.
So I can't remember, but I probably said to them when they arrive, I'm just going to have a bit of time out doing an exercise that's going to help them. And,
yeah. That might be a gateway to loads of things then, going on and coaching them or checking in with them like that through the season. Sometimes those things are just as valuable as time on the pitch. And
I don't know if it's the right word, making them accountable as well, but if they've put winning trophies and things right down the list and as a team it's number 9, and then they're getting really upset if they've been knocked out something, so well, you can show them the list and say, well, that was right down our order. Did we have fun? Did we learn new skills? Are we on the right track? Well, we're still on the right track, and might be a way of keeping their heads up in that sort of situation too. It's just something you can always check in with as a coach and the kids from time to time to see if you're all on track. I do the similar thing actually with goal setting as well, but we won't go into that with a parent and their child. Setting goals for the season and overall what they want to get out of it. Very similar idea. Cool. This could be the longest podcast we've ever done. Should we crack on, Geoff?
Yeah. Question number 4.
Yes.
My son is 14 and plays a decent standard of grassroots football. He's had a few scouts come to watch him and he's progressing well. However, he likes to play in the centre of the park and often tries quite difficult passes that often result in him giving the ball away, much to the frustration of his manager. Is there any way I can help him understand when to do difficult passes and when to keep it simple?
I suppose you asked it, so I better answer it.
Yes, please.
Difficult one, but in any situation like this, the idea of what he's trying to do is a son, isn't it yet? What he's trying to do might be the right idea, so please don't discourage them for doing something that's the right idea just because the execution wasn't right, if that makes sense, Geoff.
Yeah.
So for example, might try a defence splitting pass and they've seen, so it was a great idea and possibly the right idea, but it hasn't pulled off because the execution didn't match the idea, if you like. Then the idea was still good. You don't want to coach good ideas out of kids because you're going to coach kids to be average if you do that, because at the time that they've tried that pass they just weren't good enough technically. Now technique can be practiced, ideas much more difficult, so never discourage the idea. The child might see things that coaches and parents don't see. They might be on a completely different level, but they just haven't quite learned, or their body might not be developed enough. It might have been a 30-yard pass that they're trying and they just can't reach 30 yards yet, but the idea is really good. Like I say, defence splitting pass, the idea is right, the execution's wrong. Execution, the technique of it, can be practiced. So you need to say, that was a really good idea today, son. Why did it go wrong? What do you think we could do so that we can get more success with that in future, and then go and practice it? That would be my advice there, Geoff.
Good advice, Pez.
Thanks, mate.
I'm just
technically what I'm here for.
I'm trying to read it as if I'm Betsy, which is difficult because no one
Betsy's
is.
mind's completely
Dirty
different.
Jack.
That's why she does what she does.
And it says he's had a few scouts come to watch him and he's progressing well. Just wondering if the player knows that the scout's there, and if these defence splitting passes normally come off when they don't know the scout's there, and if it's the parent's frustration that it's not happening when the parent really wants it.
Could be a lot of pressure there.
Yeah, so I was just thinking of it.
Just something to throw in. Yeah,
from a Betsy angle.
nothing's ever
It's
black and
very
white,
good.
is it?
It's a very, you have got into my brain a little bit there.
We are learning so much from you, Betsy.
I think, yeah, I'm hypnotising you each week.
Yeah.
One thing, and I'm going to have to be careful with my language here because it can sound like I'm being negative, but I've seen sometimes in a younger player, sometimes those choices can be selfish, of I want to show what I can do here rather than this is the correct decision for the game.
Okay.
So I think it's being aware of that. Actually, if there is a coach, a scout present, is he trying to just demonstrate all of his skills in that game to be seen?
His whole repertoire.
Yeah, and actually not really demonstrating he can deal with the confines of what that game is.
Mm-hmm.
If he's trying to ping diags all the time, for example, and it's not the appropriate choice, I guess it goes back to your point, Pez. Can you identify whether it's the right idea, appropriate choice, whether it's the execution, like what it actually is? So I think that's one thing to maybe be aware of. Like, are they decisions to overcomplicate to show a skill that isn't actually fit for that game?
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the actual question, it's difficult. Is there any way I can help him to understand when to do difficult passes and when to keep it simple? Well, that's part of the problem of sport, isn't it? Of even the player understanding, like, decisions in the moment. And I don't think it's about getting that right all the time. It's maybe...
Yeah, the game's too random, isn't it?
Yeah.
Too many nuances and...
And you could argue there are no right decisions, are there? You don't know. You haven't got all the information all the time to make the right decision. You could make a decision which ends up being good, but there may have been a better decision.
And like I said, this child might see the game will see the game differently. Their football brain might be at a higher level than everyone else there, including the coaches, the parents and everyone. They might see it completely differently, so you've got to be careful not to squash the ideas. I mean, we've all played with players, Geoff, who play centre mid and try and spray 40-yard balls every time they get it, and
I was one of them.
Show off, and that can be frustrating.
Yeah.
So I think if someone's trying the same things over and over again, then you could obviously chat to them about mixing up their game a little bit. We always say keep it simple, do it well, don't we, Geoff? And normally the simplest thing is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But have it in
basics.
Be brilliant at the basics, yes, and then but have it in your locker to be different and not be scared to ping that ball whenever it needs, or that defence splitting pass, because that's what we all love,
That's what
separates them.
Hard, isn't it?
And it's going to have to be a bit of trial and error and discussion rather than criticising if it becomes frustrating.
I think encouraging a bit of reflection. Obviously, we're talking about a 14-year-old here, so you're probably at the age where you can start thinking about, okay, let's talk and reflect about the game on a level that you may not do with an under 8, for example. I can even remember when I didn't play football, but when I played netball, I would absolutely be that irritating player that would chuck balls off the back line all the time. And if I was playing with, an England international that might be able to leap into the air and take the ball, it would be a great pass. But I wasn't really playing to the people in the game I was playing. So I might have been a good player, but I'm not affecting the game in a positive way because I'm trying to do things that aren't appropriate to people around me. So there can be a frustration there, because if your son is playing at a good level and seeing things, these difficult passes might be absolutely the right thing to do, that's ending in a negative outcome because the recipient can't control the ball, for example, because they're not at his standard.
The people you're playing against might be really good as well, and reading it.
So it's also just as intelligent, if we talk about game intelligence, to adapt to the confines of the game you're actually playing in, which might be, Johnny on the wing isn't going to be able to control that ball, so that therefore isn't the right decision for this game. It might be, if you're playing in the Premier League, it's a great vision, great pass. So it's a balance. Yeah,
so the exact same idea could be good in one situation and not so good in another, depending on lots of different factors. So, I wouldn't get too het up. But I'd be quite pleased that my son's trying these things, brave enough to try these things, can see these things, I'd rather it was that way than they could only play short,
Yeah.
safe passes the whole time, nice and sideways and backwards, which obviously there is a place for, Geoff. Keeping the ball ticking over and moving, keep it simple, do it well. But you do want players that can affect a game, and just keeping possession for possession's sake is one thing, but you want kids who can affect football matches, make things happen, Geoff.
Yeah, and coming back to the scouts again, they'll all look for different things. So if their big thing at the moment is face forward and play forward all the time, and your son's doing that, that might be a great thing. The scouts might be looking for that exactly. There might be a different club scout that's going, actually, we want to keep the ball, and possession's all about moving the ball around backwards and sideways and dragging them out of position for somebody
Some
else.
scouts are looking for big, athletic, strong, quick players. You never try and guess what a scout's looking for. Just play your own game, and do it as well as you can. And when I was a scout, I like to look for how players reacted in adversity. So in this example, if the kid was trying these things and it wasn't coming off, that was fine. But I want to see how they react to it. Did they shy away from it? Did they not want the ball anymore? If the manager was on their back or the parents were sighing when they were giving it away, I'd be looking really closely for how they reacted. Are they chest out, like, give me the ball again, I'm still going to go and try it? Or do they shy away? And I think that element for me as a scout was miles more important than whether they're actually technically hitting these passes or not.
That's a really good point, because you can teach a lot of that.
Yeah,
can't you? You can coach
teachable.
a lot of that, and it's more challenging to affect mindset in that way. So that what you've just said there is something I say to a lot of athletes, whether it's a pro that I'm working with that maybe is having an international opportunity, for example, and is worried about kind of messing up. I'm like, a lot of the people watching you, whether that's managers, scouts, coaches, whoever it is, it's not the mistake they're worried about, it's what you do afterwards.
Like, they actually want mistakes.
Yeah.
If I went to watch someone play and they've had a really pretty tidy game and made no mistakes, and you've not learnt anything.
And also you might not know where their ceiling is at that particular moment. If you see no mistakes, it's like, is this player actually got more in the tank, more to show? Yeah, so that's a good point.
I much prefer it watching a player when it's raining and they're losing 5-0 and everyone's on their back and things just aren't happening for them. I want to see the character of they're still out there trying and still wanting the ball. That was the thing that always impressed me the most.
Yeah.
Players that wanted the ball. Even if, you're playing on the wing and the ball comes out to you and it pings off and then everyone sighs, and then the next time, the same situation, you still want it again. And the third time you want it again. And you think, wow, this kid's got bravery here about himself and for his team, and he's not shied away. And that was always a big thing for me. But us scouts used to look for completely different things, or maybe even be asked to look for different things as well. So you never can guess, just do your best. Body language as well, all the way through. We've gone on to sort of scouts topic now, Geoff, haven't we, a little bit, but I think it's important. Cool. Shall we move on? We're only halfway through.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious, we'll have to split this into a two-parter or move some of these forward, but we shall see. Right, question number 5. Should youth players be coached for positions in terms of individual skills and tactical awareness, or allowed to roam free and find their own cool, this person's put in speech marks?
I don't know what that
and I'm
means.
actually doing that.
Yeah, I don't know what that
in
means.
the air. I was hoping you did, because I'm not quite sure. Betsy.
I think it means, I guess, that freedom, like creativity, like almost find their own position.
Yeah.
Find their own, like, okay, this is what my skill set.
What's cool for them, what they like doing.
Yeah.
Find their place in the world, but in this case on the pitch.
Yeah, I think so. There's no context here with age group, etc. So it's difficult. But in general terms, I always think for school years 1 to 6, what's that? Under 7s to under 11s, top of my head. It's about right.
So foundation phase.
Yes, thank you. and you bail me out there. Don't get so het up on positions and coaching those positions. Try and develop them as footballers first. And if you've got a load of footballers one day, kids who are good at football, going into big school sort of age groups, then they can play in any positions that they fancy, whatever their call is, because they're good footballers.
I quite like that. Find their own call.
Yeah, I do.
Foundation phase. That's a good way of putting it.
We're going to nick that, aren't we, Geoff?
Yeah.
I can see it.
Stolen.
I'm just going to throw a spanner in there.
Yeah, I'll go on then.
I've sat in many a PDP office, so professional development phase, 18s, 21s, 23s, where there's still discussions going on at that age of, I don't think he's a 10, I think he'd be good here, or those discussions I don't think they ever stop happening, really.
Well, Kai Havertz at the moment has just gone from Chelsea to Spurs, and everyone's still trying to work out where he plays, and whether he's a striker or if he's a 10.
Yeah.
And some people think that he's going to play out wide. So yeah, it never ends.
It
absolutely
really
right.
doesn't. You even we're going back some here, but even the arguments, England national team, like how do we get certain players playing in midfield at the same time? How do we get, Gerrard and Lampard might have been in slightly different tweaked positions. I know that's probably a bit more detailed, but those conversations do genuinely still happen at that under 18, under 21 age group of actually have we got him in the right place? Maybe let's try him here. Maybe let's and sometimes that might be identified in training and not just in a match situation. Might be like, okay, let's maybe test him in this situation in training. So yeah, I don't think it's not like we funnel players into 11 or 12, right? This is what you are. I mean, with some it's going to be a bit more time crucial. For instance, like with a goalkeeper, I suppose from a certain age, if you get to age 14, 15, 16, you're still in goal, you're probably not going to come outfield at that point. But
I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah.
I think going back to my time in pro football, they would have a list of characteristics that they wanted for different positions as a club, and then they would have their squad list and have the players that had those characteristics, which was a good starting point for them. So they would play players and positions that had the right characteristics for that position. But of course, there'd be a lot of crossover with different positions that they could play.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Gareth Bale started out as a left back, didn't he, and finished as a striker. Trent Alexander-Arnold, they're trying to move into midfield. Everyone's saying he won't be able to do it, but actually, I believe he spent most of his youth career playing centre midfield, so it shouldn't be too tricky for him to pick that up. So it is very interesting. Don't pigeonhole any of them, and from a very young age, we say it all the time: experiment and explore, and let them roam free and find their own call. I love that. And
the crossovers, I suppose, between positions where you might want... I remember working with a particular team who had like psych characteristics or attributes that were listed for positions on the pitch, which I challenged a little bit because, you've got your typical centre-back, bravery, composure.
Yeah.
But actually you want all of those things in every player in different moments in the game. So actually not pigeonholing them and going, okay, well, if you start off as a defensive player and then you end up, playing as a forward, how could you kind of transfer those skills and attributes? I'm probably coming at this more from a psychological lens, but that composure on the ball, actually that's still going to stand you in good stead as a forward player. It's going to look really different.
Massively, yeah.
But composure in front of the goal might be how that transfers. So I guess there's things to be learnt as well by moving players around.
There's plenty of strikers, aren't there, that have got all the attributes but have got no composure in front of goal. And that's why they struggle a little bit. What are your thoughts, Jeffrey?
I was just thinking about what Betsy was saying around the psychological, and I'd love to see what the goalkeeper's profiling was, because they've normally got an interesting profile psychologically.
They're always the most interesting. Why is that?
I don't know.
Goalkeepers.
And then an individual sport played in a team.
Yeah.
That's what it is, I think.
Yeah, and they've got to be a bit.
Well, they do
different.
say goalkeepers have got to be crazy, don't they? I'll say it.
I didn't want to say it.
Yeah, you didn't want to say it.
I was worried about what word was going to come
out. I was just thinking of our first team this season. I felt like we weren't. I don't know what. Lots of different things, but we weren't compact enough. We weren't brave enough defensively, so we were leaking goals that we just shouldn't have been doing. Whereas the goalkeepers would literally put their faces on the line to save a goal. And I was speaking to one of our goalkeepers about it, and he suggested we put a session on that was 1v1 with no goalkeepers. And I just thought, this is going to be, the attacker's going to have the ball, loads of space to go around that one defender that can't use their hands like the goalkeeper can, and just score every single time. And the mentality shift was incredible, because there was just so few goals scored in that training session that I thought was going to be a shambles and have no returns really, other than demoralising the people that were defending 1v1. And the fact that it was just them 1v1 against the opponent that had the ball meant they did everything they could just to keep their body between the ball and the goal. And it wasn't a technical thing, it wasn't anything other than mentality and the psychological shift of those players realising, actually, so as a group of 5 players now, all we've got to do is exactly what we did, plus we're going to have our goalkeepers that are pretty awesome and will chuck their bodies on the line for everything. It was
I like that. Because I think you can. There's also, and maybe this is part of what happened as well. You can also, if you try children out in different positions, they can start to appreciate what skills and attributes their teammates are bringing, which maybe they didn't appreciate before.
And that was the exact angle that the goalkeeper was going for, was you've got to appreciate what it's like for us.
Yeah.
And it really did transfer across, and all the players just got it after 10, 15 minutes of doing that practice.
And that is maybe mentality of, you see that in 11-a-side even, don't you? That sometimes the expectation is like, oh, well, you know, the keeper's there, so I'll let him deal with that. And a lot of goalkeepers can be like, I'm the last thing. I'm when you can't, when they, what am I trying to say? You're the last man standing, essentially. Mm-hmm. So you want your back four, whatever it is, to be throwing themselves on the line to stop it even.
It's their job to protect the
yeah.
keeper from getting that far.
So even just appreciating that, and actually, if you chucked any of them in goal, would they maybe think, do you know what? I can see now why he's shouting at me to protect me a little bit.
Yeah,
so
it's a good exercise.
You can get a bit of understanding of other people's positions and attributes and what they bring to the game as well.
Yeah, it's a bit like when players are moaning at keepers, aren't they? And then you ask them to go and goal, and I'm not doing it. There's no way I'll do that. You've got to be crazy.
Yeah.
Just quickly on that one though, Geoff, I'll ask you, do you think young children get pigeonholed into positions? Sort of, you've got a stereotype for a certain position. So, for example, a manager might have the big, strong lad playing at the back, who is brave and can kick the ball the furthest to start counter-attacks, and you might have the small one, you instantly think, oh, they've got to go on the wing. And the really quick one, you think, well, we'll put them up front, so the guy at the back can hoof it up front, and now we're getting a team together that can actually win games. When actually there's not a lot of thought gone into, one, where they might want to play, and two, they might end up playing, or what's best for their development.
Up to about 10 years ago, it definitely was the case. I can remember going around different tournaments and just seeing players literally wouldn't go over the halfway line if they were the back player, if you like, or the defender in the team.
They used to ask the manager sometimes, didn't they?
Can I
go past the halfway line?
It's like
no,
it's
stay
like
there.
Trolley stops after that
Yeah,
line.
it's a bit like that. Yeah, just can't go further forward.
So I hope it's changed, but I haven't seen too much of local grassroots football in the past 10 years to know, but it definitely had been the case up until the last times I had seen it in lots of different setups.
I'm just wondering how deep set, ingrained in the mind that is now, and will go on for a long time.
Hopefully with teams like Man City winning everything this past season, managers don't see the point in doing that anymore. You'd like to think so, wouldn't you? That that's your position.
I do understand it in a way. You know, your biggest player playing him on the left wing just might look a little bit odd, because traditionally that sort of type of build would be playing either up front as a target player or
I liked
centre half
what you
as a
said
stopper.
about the attributes, and I know a lot of places do that. So you might have two players in one position that are completely different build, completely different capabilities on the ball, or different pace, but as long as they've got 2 of 4 attributes that the team's looking for, that they can use those and hone their superpowers or super strengths, whatever you want to call it. So you might have 2 players that can play in one position that do it completely differently, and that might be the 2 that you roll on and roll off with your substitutes or something, that just gives something different for the opposition to play against. So as for coaching positions, it might be much better to go towards what you mentioned.
I think if they're allowed to roam free and find their cool, which is really growing on me, that phrase, then when they are in that position, just have a chat with them and find out how they found it and whether they enjoyed it, and give them a few pointers on that position, but I wouldn't get too het up about it.
But at some point, it's also important to know your roles and responsibilities in different scenarios on the pitch, isn't it? So
yeah, and it's not fair on the children to not know what some of their roles and responsibilities are if you're chucking in a couple play it in defence when they've always played up front or something, and their parents want them to play up front and they feel under pressure and they don't want to play there, then you need to have a chat and tell them what their role is and their responsibilities. And
or their favourite player is so and so in the Premier League, so they want to play in that position. And I don't know whether this is the case nowadays. It's a few years ago when I went to school, but playing school sports, I was sort of across sports in a similar position, probably because of I wasn't very tall and I was quick, so I'd always be an attacking player, probably on the outside and not in the middle of a pitch, whatever sport, whether that was netball, hockey, football. It was, so I don't know whether that contributes sometimes with children, actually, and strangely, often like the goalkeeper, again, whether that was netball or hockey or football, was actually the same person at school. So it was like, you're a defender and you're a defender in all sports. I know that seems really rigid, but it didn't just kind of work like that when I was at school. Whether that is because naturally we fell into our attributes, or whether it was, coaches, teachers going, okay, like you said, you're quick, okay, you're tall,
sort of on a subconscious level, you judge by how the player looks and the attributes that or their strengths, and go, right, well, that fits that, because that's going to have our best chance of winning the game. I see why it's done. Maybe it's the thing about outcomes and development again, being a bit different. I mean, I was the same as you, Betsy. I was pigeonholed in exactly the same position for every sport, so the bench. So I used to sit there and watch every game, no matter what it was. So exactly the same as you, but at least you got to play a bit. Right, Geoff. Is it you or me now?
That's me for question number 6.
Question number 6, goodness.
It's a long one.
Oh, let's try and answer it quickly.
Is there a way to help children who struggle to retain information learn what skill to use, what touch to try, and when to use them? We have a boy who's dyslexic and struggles with the hows and the whens, but ultimately always tries and never gives up. He sometimes gets deflated as he knows he can do more.
Oh, we should have put this on number 1, shouldn't we? Betsy, this is definitely in your...
I didn't think you were going to come
field.
to me.
Oh, I've just literally batted it off England cricket style from the 70s.
I'm going to, with time in mind, I'm going to keep it short and sweet.
Yeah.
I think probably, maybe I'm oversimplifying, but figuring out what his preferred kind of learning styles are, and sometimes keeping things super simplistic really drills home a point. So, if he's a visual learner, for example, how can you start to use, maybe like tactics boards or tactics notepads to kind of map out, where in the pitch might you do this, or it's something that plays to his strengths already. So even I worked with a young girl fairly recently who would really struggle to take on information, retain it, and me and her parents actually drew upon some of the things that were fed back from school. So actually, maybe even using that in this situation to go, okay, although this is a football context, is there any feedback from school, or how does my child learn at school, and how can I apply that in this setting? So maybe think about that.
I think that this child will get it. They just possibly need a bit more time than the rest of the team at this moment. So maybe look at ways to accelerate that child's learning. So I've put try as many practices as possible, as many decision-rich environments as possible, so that the child has lots and lots of decisions to make in training, and hopefully that will accelerate the situations, the scenarios, and how they've got to deal with them. The more, what's the professional term? The affordances for action, I think, is the professional term. So as many affordances for action as you can, allow them to make loads of mistakes and errors, because I think they need to learn for themselves. If people are getting frustrated with them, I don't know if they are, they're not, but possibly their teammates are, the manager might be, the parents, the kid's own parents might be, but it's not their journey, it's his, and I don't think it can be forced. So you need to take the pressure off the kid, and like I say, put them in as many decision-rich environment as possible. Don't let it be a big problem, because they will get it eventually, I'm sure. And as long as this kid's still enjoying the game and taking part and being active, I can't see the real problem. Well, I can if this child might be seen to be letting the team down in some way, but it'd be a bit harsh, don't you think, Geoff?
Yeah, I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic.
Yes, I know. I didn't know whether you would say that on air, so I didn't
definitely,
go there.
Definitely coach lots of children, and in the past I've coached lots of children that do and still do, and some been with us a really long time. Some show it in a completely different way. Like I reckon there'll probably be so many that sort of just stay quiet, maybe a bit like me, and look like they're really engaged but have no clue what's going on sometimes. And others, as soon as you start to do some coaching or bring them in, they'll just start talking to the person next to them, because mentally they're thinking, oh, not this again, I can't be bothered, because it's not for them. So it's for a coach, it's a really hard thing to manage, isn't it? Because you kind of don't want to let the others down that can learn a certain way and could get so much more from spending time doing one type of session, but you also don't want to, I'm just thinking of individuals in particular, where if I just put on a match session, they'll have the best session ever, they'll put in the most effort, they'll do the most, but if you want to work on something more specific that takes a bit of time to gain some understanding, it's just a no-go sometimes. And then
you feel tactically there.
Yeah, and you feel like you might be letting somebody else down, because it could be tactically, it could be back to the ball mastery and the individual stuff that you really want to stretch everybody, which is a bit more manageable because they can work at their own speed and on different things at the level that they're ready to move on to. But it's a really tricky one to manage, isn't it? And that's even knowing all the difficulties that I've had through being coached in the past.
Well, I think it's important that everyone sticks by this player.
Yeah.
And that's everybody that's involved at the club and his teammates, and really help him and know that he's got support and that there's no pressure there, and try and keep it simple for him in every situation possible, I guess.
And I guarantee whatever the struggle is, there'll be other things that outweigh that, like the negatives. There'll be something else that's positive that comes from whatever the difficulties are that you might not have seen yet, but will come out in the wash later down the line.
Yeah, and I should say, when I say keep it simple, I don't mean keep it simple necessarily tactically or anything to do with the game, but the way you explain things.
Yeah.
Try and keep your explanations and your demonstrations and the actual game and the task of the game or drill, whatever you're doing,
and parents
as simple
can be
as possible.
Really useful for this. I've had parents come and say, my child just wants 3 trigger words repeated 3 times in a row. Like, it might be something as simple as that just helps keep them engaged. You know, a few words that they know that from the past that have really helped their child. So get them involved as much as you can.
Brilliant, Geoff. Anything else, Betsy?
Not from me.
No. Crikey. What are we up to now, Geoff?
Question number 7.
Is that
you?
Is that me?
Yeah.
Right, okay, cool. Right, question number 7. How can I help my child go to the ball more? Now, Geoff, over the years, how many times have we heard this?
Plenty.
I have to be honest, in all my years of being in football at all levels, I'm still not 100% sure what parents mean when they say, my child just doesn't go to the ball. Can you help them go to the ball more? So I'm glad I asked it. So what have you got for me, Geoff?
Well, my first thought is it annoys me because
I knew that.
Betsy said the other day, comparison's the thief of joy, and it just makes me think that's you comparing your child to another child who's on the ball more because they're either going and winning it back more or going and get it off their teammates more. So it's
Hogging the glory a little
giving
bit.
them more chance to show off what they can do, whereas their child might not be doing that as much. We've even had people ask us in one-to-one sessions, can you help my child go to the ball more? And you just think, not really. I can help them be more comfortable
I've
and
had that so
confident
many
on the
times.
ball so that they want the ball more, but I'm not going to do a session on run over to the ball because it just makes no sense in my head.
So you want to pay me money to teach your child to run towards the ball? No,
Yeah.
sorry.
And then I just had a second thought. Like, I was thinking about when I played youth football and we started playing in a floodlight league. And I loved being. At that point I was a centre back, and I loved going and winning the ball and heading the ball and being bigger and stronger than the striker and trying to get there first. And when the goalkeeper got the ball for the opposition, they basically just punt it up in the air as high as they could. And because it was floodlight, I couldn't really judge where the ball was going to be. And it wasn't until I got my eyes tested that I realised that's what it was. But I think my teammates and the manager and everyone thought I was scared of heading the ball, but I loved it and I wanted to do it more than anybody else.
I just you running around.
I'd run underneath the ball,
anything.
I'd run back too far and it would drop before
Yeah.
me, and I couldn't get the distances right. So it actually became a bit of a thing, and I thought, oh, maybe I don't like heading the ball, but I knew I did. So it might just be something that you haven't realised yet or spotted yet, or the child hasn't realised and spotted yet, that might be stopping them. It could be as simple as get your eyes tested and something like that. But
it could just be a confidence thing. They don't want to get on the ball because they're feeling pressure from somewhere. And if everyone went to the ball, people would be moaning that they're not in time and space and spread out enough. So I wouldn't get too het up about it. I can see the frustration if you've got a child, especially if you know the child's capable and is not getting involved in games because they're not getting on the ball enough. I can see that, and maybe that's what they mean by this situation. They want to go to ball. Really, they mean they want them to be involved in the game a bit more. And that's a better starting position to try and help with. And you need to get to the bottom of the reason why they're not involved in the game. Are they playing at the right level? Are they shying away from the game? Are their teammates not passing to them because they might make mistakes? It could be a whole load of things here. So just teaching or helping your child to go to the ball more, it's too difficult, isn't it?
what are your thoughts, Betsy?
I think probably it'd be hard to comment without more context, because from what you guys have said, there might actually be lots of value in what the child's doing off of the ball or away from the ball. They might actually be, executing a game plan really, really well. So don't lose sight of that.
Might be at a much better level than everyone else and is making runs that no one else is seeing, so they're not getting the ball. Could be in loads of things.
Again, I'm going to use a netball example because that's predominantly my sport that I played, but at a young age, it's like you get the ball and everyone runs towards the ball, and that's coached out of you from a young age. To actually, if you're doing that, you're actually not in a very good position. So actually, how can you start to recognise moments in the game where this isn't for me to go for that one, or I'm doing another job by hanging back here? So actually, it might be understanding a bit more about why the child's doing that. There might actually be a good level of restraint. If it is a confidence thing, then of course you'd want to change that. You'd want to encourage the child to have the belief that he or she can go and get involved with the game. But I think without context, it's hard to say there. It's almost maybe the parent, perhaps in combination with the coach, depending on what age and level we're talking about here.
Yeah,
understanding why that's happening.
Find out if the coach thinks it's a problem.
Exactly, or whether it's actually good play.
I'm not just saying this because Geoff's here, but one thing that would help with this, from all the different angles we've looked at, is getting them involved in futsal, which is, you don't get any passengers in futsal because it's only 5 aside, 4 out on pitch, so they'll get loads of the ball, and that might build their confidence and their touch and all the things that we know futsal's good for. You can't just sit out on the wing in futsal and hope that you get the ball. As soon as that whistle goes, you're involved, and there is no hiding and disappearing, and could really help with confidence, and many of the issues that we're getting at could be the reason why this child is not going to the ball more. I'm looking at you, Geoff, because I've mentioned futsal, but
yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with it. And then
follow him in the action
and be patient as well, and don't try and force
don't make it a big thing. We had one kid, didn't we, where
parents were shouting out from the sideline,
go to the ball all the time. This is where we get it from, because we used to turn to each other and say, what do they mean go to the ball? It's holding his position well that he's playing in today. It was frustrating, wasn't it?
Yeah. Question number 8.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Oh, a little confession, as we've been doing confessions. I used to play a bit of netball too.
Did you?
Yeah, did you know that, Geoff?
Yeah, you've told me several times, and you've also told me how good you were at it.
Yeah, that's why I've mentioned it again.
Yeah.
Take you on pairs.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Can you do netball 1-to-1? I don't know if you can, because you've got no one to pass to.
We'd have to. We'd have to go.
You'd have to go to the ball, wouldn't you?
I would have to go to the ball, wouldn't I?
Don't go to the ball.
Oh no, you're all confusing me now. Let's move on. Question number 8, Geoff.
My son is 12 and has been diagnosed with Osgood-Schlatter's disease. He's been recommended to stay off sport for a while and take it easy. He's a very active child whom is always playing football, sport, and is finding it really hard, really frustrating, especially as there's not any definite recovery period, and sometimes it's not painful and he could participate. Have you any advice for how I can help him through this difficult period as he gets very down?
Okay, I'll jump in there first just to say a little bit about Osgood-Schlatter's, because my lad suffered with it, and it's just below the knee. There's a bony prominence, I think is what the official term is, where the tendons of the quadricep muscle attach via the patella tendon. Well, I used to be in the medical game, didn't I, Geoff? I was a sports therapist, so and what happens is during growth spurts, not all of these things grow at the same time, at the same rate. So you can have shorter muscles or longer muscles compared to the bones. They might have grown a bit quicker. And anyway, it puts a lot of pressure on the bony prominence just below the knee, and it is very, very painful. And if a child does keep playing, you can get a permanent lump there, which my son has on both, to be fair to him, underneath. And it's just about managing it. And I should say, we're not doctors, so we can't really diagnose and give too much injury advice. But Betsy, right up your street for how to deal with a child that's getting very down because they're not doing the thing that they love and the thing that they're good at 12 years of age.
Yeah, I think at 12, and probably some of the people listen to this with younger children or coaching younger children, you're at some point going to be involved with possibly their first experience of injury, or their first period where they're restricted, they're not allowed to play, or they're on a monitored an adjusted program, for example, because of something like this.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this a lot in academy football. Sort of at that age, there's a lot of players that will struggle with, especially this kind of thing, because it's an injury, but it's not something
It's an overuse injury that's not an overuse injury, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's like a growing related thing, and it's sometimes these sorts of things are more difficult for a child to process, because it's not like, oh yeah, I got clattered at the weekend and I'm gonna be out sprained my ankle, and it's a really definitive, this is my injury, this is my time scale. I think using role models in this example can be helpful to look at actually part of being, particularly if you've got a son or a daughter that is striving to be a professional. Injury is part of professional sport. That is going to be part of your job. You will not go through your career or actually just through life without having some kind of injury or ailment or restriction on playing. So I think normalising that, and also giving a bit of leeway of, this might be the first time that your son's ever been told at 12 that he can't do something, in terms of you can't play football.
It's a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not easy at all. So I think probably normalising it.
It's part of the process and the journey.
And particularly, if your son's got a role model that's playing in the Premier League or the Championship or whatever, actually maybe do a bit of research and look at what that player will have had, probably a number of injuries, ranging from something that's put them out for a week potentially to something more serious. So any role models that you can find to almost go, okay, well, he went through this. You might not be able to backtrack to the age of 12, but I guess normalising injuries as a part of sport rather than, this in his time
doesn't
is
help
massive.
when some players get labelled as injury prone, does it? Or
no, that was me, Pez.
Yeah,
that was me.
I was too, to be honest. A lot of similarities here, but yeah, I was very injury prone, and for one team was known as sick note after Darren Anderton. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but I like that, trying to normalise it and finding role models or players that they follow. That it's very rare that anyone goes for a whole season, so their favourite player at some point in the season probably will miss games through injury or a niggle. This one's particularly frustrating because there is no end point, and with my son, well, when am I going to be better? We don't know. Yeah. And he could do lots of things and then it would flare up afterwards, or even he'd wake up in the night in agony. And it was a lot of stretching and bags of peas, frozen peas on there and stuff like that. But you might want to go, always with any injury start with your doctor, but they might want to go to a proper physio and get some more advice from them. See if there's any way you can manage it, because this does become a problem that's something you manage through, rather than, like you say, if you sprained your ankle, you pretty much know it's 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what grade it is, and there's an end point, and you know what rehab you've got to do. Yeah. Something like Oscar Satters is really difficult, because you know what it is, but you don't know how long it's going to be or how bad it's going to be. You just know it's painful, and getting a kick on that area or even a ball on it is agony. Or a cone, yeah. I've got to put that in my risk assessment now. Thank you, I never thought of that. Check whether children have got Osgood Schlatters disease before I launch cones at them. Cheers, Betsy. Thanks for that. Always adding value to everything that I do. Right. The last two are about pro clubs. And it's me, isn't it?
Yeah, I wrote one line of notes on that last question.
Oh, goodness. That's rare.
It was just maybe try some other hobbies or sports that don't inflame it, so you've got something else to focus on.
Yeah, so swimming, things like that were good for Josh. And if it is stopping them doing something that they love, is there anything else they can do to do with that sport whilst they can't participate in it? Can they watch games? Can they have a project on the game, or some sort of task that's going to help their maybe psychological development while they can't progress actually on the pitch?
Question number 9 is yours.
Cool. From experience, is there much aftercare after a child has been released from a pro club? I am looking at you, Betsy, because you've been involved in the pro game, as have we, Geoff, but our players are slightly younger. And it's a bit You were in at the serious deep end, weren't you? So we'll go
at the
to
business end.
The business end. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. You're at the business end of the business.
Yeah, I think probably to caveat what I'm about to say, that I've only really dealt with players in that professional development phase, so I don't really know what it looks like.
What age is that?
So under 18s, under 23s.
Yes.
Which that is a key point to be released then, when you've maybe been, some of those players been at the club for a long time or been purchased at that point and being released potentially. So I don't know too much about what that looks like at the clubs I've been at from a younger age, but I think sadly it varies a lot. There's no, from what I've seen, there's no particularly standardised way of this is what.
Do you think there should be?
Yeah, to a point, I think there should.
Okay.
Because you're otherwise reliant on potentially senior management or the club's ethos, how the club wants to operate in terms of what do we agree happens when we release a player. So one of the clubs I worked at did it really, really well for the under 18s that were released, and actually made it like first of all, it was never a surprise. So I think that's the key thing. Yeah. Is if you've got a player. That's a big thing. Even at our age groups, it should never be a surprise. No, you've failed the player, in my view, as the club, coaches, whatever. If a player walks in to a potential release meeting and doesn't know, and it's a shock, then there's been some kind of disservice there on why is that player. That should
never happen.
Yeah.
In this day and age.
So that's an important thing. And that one of the clubs I worked at would actually present the player with a photograph or a shirt or something as almost like thanks for everything you've given to the club. And the support was really thorough. So it was, okay, now you'll have a meeting with whether it was me or the other psychologist that was there. Parents were involved if they wanted to be involved, depending on the age of the player that was being released. There were other things that the club were really open to in terms of suggestions. So quite a lot of these players at this age would be with a host family. They'd be living away from home. Some of them living independently if they're under 23s. And actually being aware, I made a point one year of saying, do the host families know today's the day or this time they're getting their decision, because they're going to walk back into that person's house. So it's just as important for them to maybe be aware and be looped into the situation. So little details like that, for me, that's when a pro club do it really well and go, actually, what do we know about this player? Is this player going to react badly and need a lot of support around them? Do we let them just go home, or do we make them train in the afternoon? So some of those little details are really important. Sometimes it's not done very well. I've heard stories about, not necessarily at clubs I've been at, to be honest, but of younger children, they're not really being much information. And then it's almost like, well, you're not with us anymore, and for that reason we don't really care. There's no investment of energy into how can we relay maybe important information or support players, but also parents. Some parents be like, well, what do I say? How do I deal with that?
Sometimes the parents are more devastated than the kids.
Yeah, exactly.
From experience.
Exactly. So
like we spoke about it before, about their identity being entwined with it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, wham, it's gone.
Yeah.
And you've got to start again.
And then what do you do? Is it because some parents will say, I want to shove them straight back into another club. I want them seen by another scout. Let's get them back in somewhere else. And but yeah, I suppose I'm going a bit off topic. From my experience, there is out there good aftercare from Premier League academies.
Yeah.
And there's a bit more awareness that these clubs now have player care departments or individuals. There are psychologists there working within academies. Some of these things are really in place now to give that level of support. So largely my experience has been good, but it may vary depending on the category of the academy.
A great idea for the psychologists at all the clubs and the head of academies to all get together, whether annually or at least once, to chat out and discuss a standard procedure just you mentioned there about the host families, other clubs might not have thought of that.
Yeah.
And just say, okay, so you have a little bit of a tick box, but I know it's nuanced and very individual, but
Yeah.
just a standard. I mean, you don't want it to become like we've done this. That's,
Yeah, exactly.
We've done that.
Yeah, now we'll ship them off.
But
yeah.
just some sort of standard guide.
Yeah.
Things to think about.
Yeah.
One
thing I actually made a real point of saying that it should change was these meetings, particularly with under 18 players, were moved around a lot. So it would fit. Oh, you know, we'll do the release players when we're out of the youth cup, or we will. There's a big meeting that day, so let's just do them on another day. And actually, for the player, that's massive.
Mm-hmm.
To think, okay, on Monday the 14th of July, I'm going to be given this news, and then it comes to the week before and it's like, actually your meeting will be the following Monday because the academy leadership team going out for lunch or whatever. Some of that's handled poorly.
So there's got to be a respect there for the player and the
how important
the
it's
size of the impact
that
it's going to have on that child.
Because although they may know the decision.
Yeah.
That might also look different. So someone that thinks they're going to be offered a deal might only be offered a year extension, for example, or a third year scholar sometimes happens.
It's really tough
varies.
on them.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what the answer is, but like I say, if you guys are doing what you can and talking to each other maybe, then it can only improve. And it's not like it was way back in the day where it was horrendous. We haven't had much experience of it, Geoff, because we never released one player.
No.
When we were involved in the pro game, it's one of our things, we wouldn't do it. So because the development centre that we ran, I was the scout for the area, so I only brought in kids that we knew we wanted to work with or could work with and we could help develop. So there was no need so we kept it small.
Yeah.
What a lot of development centres, the problem they have is they have lots of scouts, especially if you're in a big area or areas overlap, and you could just get different kids turn up at training. So you just get told Tiny Tim and Big Tim are in tonight and we've got those from this club and this club, and you come in and the coaches might go, well, we wouldn't have recommended them, they're way below the standard we've got here, and it's not fair on a kid, but we were in control of the whole process. So it's a bit different for us. We never released anybody. We've had players later go and get released, haven't we?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting for us to find out what sort of aftercare there was with that. So I'm glad you're here, Betsy, because we'd be get stumped with that. But we're all in agreement. It's very, very important, and there should be lots of things put in place. This more often than not, this is one of the biggest traumas. Let's have it right. It is a trauma for a kid's life at that stage.
Yeah.
It needs to be treated as if that's going to be your child going through that process. Treat everyone else as you'd want to be treated, really, doesn't it? So that it should be the number one priority, really, shouldn't it? The aftercare for the ones, because everyone knows what professional football looks like, but do you know what it looks like if it's not that is the outcome?
Couple of things with that. I mean, I've often wondered whether there's some sort of answer with released kids, whether there's somewhere where they can go where they're still under the club's umbrella to soften the blow. And again, I know you're sat here, but I've often thought whether these clubs could have a futsal team or teams or a squad, and then they can go and play for, whether it's Brighton, Portsmouth, Southampton, whoever it might be, could go and play for their futsal club for a while. So they're still involved with the club, so parents' egos and the kids' ego as well, maybe, from the disappointment of not being the pro at school anymore. They're still playing there, they're still learning and developing, and just might soften the blow and keep them in. And they can keep looking at them as well and then bring them back if they suddenly develop further.
I mean, the ideal scenario for everyone would be, in my opinion anyway, all the pro clubs link into a decent futsal club in their area. So if it was Manchester area, you'd have Bolton, you'd have Manchester, Liverpool got a futsal club up that way. There's plenty that, and then if this is the outcome for the child, then go and spend 2-3 months at that club, and maybe
under our umbrella,
Yeah.
they're on hand to still have access to
and academies could
psychologists.
have futsal friendlies with those clubs all the times, and you'd see a lot more children that way, and you'd know that they'd be in a decent environment, and then they're not just going back to any old grassroots club.
And other clubs can see him play and think,
Yeah.
well, that kid's good.
Exactly.
One thing I did know at the club that I was at, when they released a player, I don't know from what age, but they used to put video clips together because all the matches and stuff are filmed now, so they put their montage together, which was really nice. Here's your best bits, and then they could take that to other clubs and say, well, this is what I can do to maybe get themselves a trial somewhere else. So I always thought that was a nice touch, because it must take a bit of time and effort for the club to put that together for every player. What I don't like is the so-called elite leagues and the elite teams releasing players, and they are just guessing at it because there's no aftercare, there's no expertise, there's no psychologist. It's just, you're not good enough for our team, you're not going to help us win games, you're out, or bunged in the B team or whatever it might be, or you can just come training and you're not picked at the weekend, whatever it might be. I don't like it, because football's for everyone, and there is a level for everyone to play and enjoy the game, and I don't think any kid should be getting... Well, in an ideal world, no kid would get released from any club, pro or not. But I know it is the business in the pros, and they are trying to do what they can to soften that blow. But below that, no kid should be getting released from a grassroots team.
Never, ever.
Right, last one then. What a slog this has been. I feel like...
I'm getting twitchy now.
I feel like a cricketer, Geoff, that's been at the crease all day, getting bombarded with spin bowls and fast balls.
All right, let's crack on then.
Last one, yeah.
Question number 10. Do you think there's a good age for a child to join a pro club, or does it depend entirely on the individual?
Great bowling, Jeffrey. Right.
I'll go first.
Yeah, go on, Betsy. I love it when you go first.
I felt some delay, and I'm just going to go straight in, and then I'm done. I'm going to walk out the door.
We'll just keep waffling on for ages.
So I think it's a really cheesy response, but it's just all dependent on circumstance and the journey. Like, I don't think there's a right or wrong. Okay, get them in really early because that's the best way. You hear success stories. I think this is probably the key. Success stories of, I think I spoke on one of the last podcasts about, a lad that I worked with who actually wasn't picked up by a pro club until 17, 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And he is on a hell of a journey right now, out on loan, playing in the league, like having a whale of a time. But you can also hear, younger players that have been at pro clubs from a really young age. You look at like James Ward-Prowse or
Mason Mount.
Yeah, there's so many players that you can look at that have, but there's also loads of players that come in at under 8s and get released at under 18. So it's like there's no set way where you think this is not necessarily the best way. So I think my very quick answer that I've made very long is I don't think you can be prescriptive with it. I think it depends not just on the individual but on circumstance as well.
It's easy to connect the dots looking back, so you can say, oh, I wish I hadn't put them in at that age, because looking back, but in the time you won't know. You have to sort of take a punt a little bit. I mean,
you've got to look season on season. Are they in the best place right now? And you're not always in control. You're probably hardly ever going to be in control of where if they get picked up by a pro club. Is that your decision? Is it, they might get spotted by a scout really young. They might not. It doesn't, you're not in control of that.
Yeah, I get asked a lot about, is it best to go in early or late? Which is the same sort of question as this. So clubs have development centres for under 6s, under 7s and under 8s. And then they have an advanced group. So the best players from the under 8s, I think the advance is only for the under 8s. This is going back a little bit, things might have changed, but it's probably the same. So they go into an advanced group, and then that advanced group will be the core of the players that then get a contract at under 9s, and it'll go from under 9s to under 16s. So it is possible that the easiest time to get your child into a pro club is from a development centre, under 6, under 7s, under 8s, to get signed at under 9s. The trouble with going in at under 9s is, I've just worked out in my head, I think it's 8 years. You've then got to be at that club for 8 years, 8 seasons, without getting released, before getting offered a scholarship at under 17s scholars. You use 16 at the time, but it's under 17s that you're going to.
Yeah.
A long time anyway. And along that journey, when you start at under 9s, you have to be within, I think it's an hour's catchment area of the club's training ground. Then at a certain age that extends to an hour and a half, and then it disappears altogether, and then you're suddenly competing with the best kids from all around the world and coming in and getting signed from different clubs who want your place. So the chances, if you go in at a young age, of seeing through all the 8 years, is very, very slim. I haven't got the statistics here. So I've often been inclined to think if you go in at under 15s and under 16s, the club really, really wants you because they've seen a hole there in what they've already got, and you already... A lot of clubs will only pick players to come in that are better than what they've already got, or in the top 3, 4, maybe 5. So if you're getting asked to go and join a pro club at under 15s, under 16s, a bit like Kean Tyman, Finn Tonks, who we were with yesterday, Geoff at Bournemouth, they were both late ones. And we had players in the same team that went in at under 9s who didn't make the full journey. And they've just leapt ahead of them by going in late. So I often think there's no rush. Maybe it is later the better. Because if you go in at under 15s, you've only got 1 or 2 years to impress, keep your place. But there is no...
But then you might have developed all that resilience from being there at under 9s all the way through too, haven't you? So
yeah, and you know the club that way if you've been there from under 8s, under 9s, all the way through. But it is rare. It is rare.
There's no right way, is what I would say.
No, and Charlie Webster was playing in a five-a-side tournament with me, and Chelsea scouts wanted him to go there, and he was an under 6 or under 7, and chatted with his dad and decided between us that it was too young, and the way Charlie played and stuff, he didn't need the pressure and just go and enjoy it. And then they came back when he was 10 years old or an under 10, and they thought, well, do you know what, the club is still keeping tabs on him. He's maturer now, let's go and have a look. And they did, and they signed him, and now he's on loan in the Dutch top flight and making a career for himself, and played for England and all sorts. So there is no wrongs or rights, very individual with it.
Geoff, you're going to round us up today? Geoff's final thought?
No, it's got to be Pez's every time.
Well, I can dive straight in with this episode was sponsored by SR Health, Safety and Engineering Limited, so big thanks to them, and don't forget that football isn't that important, but children are. And thanks guys, we'll see you next time.
Oh my good God.
Yay!
I was going to write down